Good evening. My name is Tom McGrath. I'm the editor of Philadelphia Magazine. My pleasure to welcome you all to our conversation tonight with Nelson Diaz. Thank you very much for coming out on a very miserable night. You're a few diehard souls, so much appreciation. I think people who are this committed to the electoral process probably deserve 2 votes. So, this is Philadelphia, you actually didn't get 2 votes. This is the second in a series of our conversations with this year's mayoral candidates. Looking forward very much tonight to the conversation. Just to do a quick commercial for other conversations that we have coming up. On April 2nd, we'll hear from Jim Kenney. On April 15th, we'll hear from Tony Williams. And on April 27th, we'll hear from Lynn Abraham. So I encourage you to come out to those as well. Our goal here really tonight is to get to know the candidates in this series. And Patrick Kerkstra, our deputy editor, will be leading us in this conversation, but we'll have some time at the end for your own questions for Nelson Diaz. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to Venture Forth, our host, and I have to say a few words from Marvin Weinberg.
Good evening, welcome to Venture Forth. Venture Forth, for those of you who don't know, is a space which I acquired a few months ago. I promptly converted into a not-for-profit organization. We are simultaneously a co-working space for tech companies, but we also have now become an incubator. We have currently 10 companies here who we are mentoring and supporting and subsidizing. Our goal is to grow them with the objective of keeping them here, succeeding in Philadelphia. We also are about to launch our Learning Annex. The Learning Annex will similarly be subsidized and low cost. The goal is to be able to graduate hundreds, if not thousands, of talented young individuals each year to fill the growing demand for technical talents here in Philadelphia. Our commitment as a foundation is that the programs will be free for the young and underprivileged. They'll be free or deeply subsidized for veterans, and for everybody else, they'll simply be a fraction of what the market rates might otherwise be for this quality of program. I'd like to thank our community organizer, Melissa. I don't know if Jason's back there as well, our other community organizer. And then finally, I want to thank my good friend Giovanni Insana from Pepper Hamilton. They provided the pretzels and beer and sodas and tasty cakes for this evening's event. Thank you very much to them as well. Welcome, glad to see you. Hope we'll see you back here sometime soon. We have events all the time, and these programs are always free and open to the public. Good evening.
Thank you, Marvin. One more quick commercial before we get started. Beginning in January, we had the pleasure of launching a new channel on phillyMag.com. It's called Citified. It's all about politics, ideas, urban affairs, and just has some terrific coverage of Philadelphia. So if you haven't yet had a chance to check that out, I encourage you to do that. So, with no further ado, let's get to our conversation. Please welcome Patrick Kerkstra and Nelson Diaz.
Thanks very much for coming out, guys, on such a miserable night. I really appreciate it. We have, as our guest tonight, a genuine Philadelphia civil rights pioneer, Nelson Diaz, who's had a pretty remarkable career. If you're not familiar with it, let me go over a few of the highlights. He's a former White House fellow. He's a former judge. He's a former city solicitor in Philadelphia. He's a former general counsel at the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And he's a big-time attorney to boot. More recently in private practice. So he's had a remarkable career. Now he's running for mayor. And I thought we'd start, Judge, by talking a little bit about your background. You grew up in Harlem.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about sort of your circumstances and what brought you to Philadelphia.
Well, right after finishing college, there was a man by the name of Peter Diacoris who had recruited a number of law students, African Americans throughout the country, And
Let's go back a little bit first. Tell me about growing up in Harlem, if you could.
I tried to answer the question. Sometimes you want to forget. It was not easy. I started pretty much, never slept in a bed till I was in public housing. I was a very sickly child until I got to public housing. At 10 years old, my first room, I thought I was middle class. Once I had my room, my window out looking at the greatest basketball players I've ever seen in my life. And then played baseball for a guy by the name of Leroy Orders, who came out of the Negro Leagues, who really helped me develop my body. And I was able to get away from my asthma as a result of the allergies and all the other issues. I worked since the age of 10. I started in co-op, carrying packages. I was a guinea pig for an organization at Columbia University doing test taking. And then when I went to high school, I was a messenger boy out of Grand Central Station. And after that, I worked for Gimbel's Brothers and was a caddy.
All that before in high school and earlier.
All of that by the time I graduated from college. And I had even worked in an accounting firm in between my caddying. And so when I graduated, there was the chairman of the accounting department had sent a recommendation in for me for law school. I didn't apply because standardized testing was not my strength. I was very poor in my LSATs. And so I didn't apply to law school at all. A guy by the name of Peter Forrest called me from Philadelphia, said, "You'd like to come to Philadelphia, it's a good community here." So I said, "All right, I'm going." That was after I had accepted a job with Arthur Young Company and thought that I was going to be a great accountant, because that was my first love. I came here and realized there were some real problems in the city. Only 78 African Americans had ever passed the bar before I took the bar. There were many African Americans that had been flunked out of Temple University before I got there. And the 9 of us decided to form the Black Boston Association. I was their treasurer. And the second year of the law school, we took over the law school and got rid of the dean. That guy's name was Norvell.
How'd you do that?
We all decided to resign from the law school and filed a human relations complaint, at which time a great visionary, the acting president, used to be president, Walkman, spoke to Norvell and said, "I think you should leave." And at which time Joe Marshall, who just passed away recently, became the acting dean for that year, and the guy who recruited me became the dean, Peter Lee Forrest, and then the president of the institution. So he made a good investment.
Bit of a coup.
Well, you know, the school changed for the better. Not only were we being under pressure, but 2/3 of the students were flunking out of school. So here you had students who had high LSATs, high academic accomplishments, and they were really being thrown out of school. They had attendance requirement for adults. I was very popular because I didn't have a seat, so I would sit in everybody's seat that was empty. And as a result, the school became a better school. Today it's probably one of the best law schools in the country. And I was very proud to be part of that change agent.
So, I mean, so your activism days in Philadelphia go back to kind of your first days in the city.
Well, when I stopped that, I then went to the university, took over the university, and tried to open up a university for other students as well. And at this time,
what do you mean when you took over the university?
Well, once we finished the law school, I had another mission, which was there were only 35 Latino students in the entire university, and we were in the heart of North Philadelphia. So I had another one of my demonstrations, at which time again Walkman, a very perceptive man, had us gather together. There was, at that time, an organization called the Young North Party, which was an offshoot of the Black Panthers. And there was a number of Aspira kids, high school kids, who wanted to get into college, who couldn't get into college because of the lack of opportunities. Walkman was extremely perceptive, and he opened up the school, placed a counselor. We had what was called a Temple Opportunity Program at the time. That was before community college became the feeder system. And that was the feeder system that essentially opened the school. And today you have over 13% of the Latino students there. And I think this president, the new president, has done a great job of increasing that.
And that's really been a sort of a theme of a lot of your life, it seems, right? Attempting to get Philadelphia to open its eyes to the large Latino community that lives here.
Well, I think it's not only the Latino community, but the program was also oriented to try to bring women in. There had only been 3 women in my class in 1969, and so this program, which is known as the space program, brought in more women into the program, brought in kids who had the tribe backgrounds from Kensington. I remember a young kid that we brought in from Queens who then became a prosecutor when he left back, and thanked me to death because he got the opportunity to go to law school. So we also did it for underprivileged kids, and what we did was we had 2 criteria, obviously the grades and the writing sample, but we also looked at the background of the individuals and see what they had to overcome. And for example, this kid from Queens, Italian kid from Queens, his mother had psychiatric problems. He really had to work through his whole problems in school. And so that the opportunity for him would not have been available at either law school, but at Temple. And so that's the important thing, is that we were looking for the diamonds. That was the Commonwealth theory. There were diamonds in the rough. We wanted to take those diamonds and really have them flourish.
You've made education in schools really the centerpiece of your campaign. We're going to get real specific here, but first, tell me why education?
First, I'm going to tell you that I never thought about thinking about running at this time. And then I was overcome with a lot of guilt and a lot of trouble about the fact that we are flunking out over 50% of our kids in the public school system. And they have to be predominantly 85% of schools minority kids. And I come from a similar background. I grew up the hard way, lack of nourishment, lack of health opportunities, lack of recreational opportunities, and so forth. So I grew up in a similar manner. And so I felt that when I saw kids that were a lot smarter than I was, who had more capacity than I had, who didn't get the opportunities, that couldn't turn themselves around, and many of them died with HIV virus, many of them died as a result of gang fights. I sort of felt that you can't complain if you don't do something about it. So what I did was I decided and told my wife that I'm quitting my corporate boards and quitting the easy life to essentially assure myself that I will not live, and I cannot live by allowing these kids to continue to die as they are dying in our city. 28% of the city is poor. We have one of the poorest cities in the country. This is a great, beautiful city, and you see the center city, which is vibrant. You see some of the West Philadelphia areas, which is vibrant. You see a little bit in the University City, and then you see in the North Philadelphia area some vibrancy. And I'd like to see the whole city have that benefit. We have 80 institutions.
And you think education is the principal route to get there right now? So a couple of questions on schools. First off, I mean, it seems like the root of a lot of the problems right now is funding. I think you agree with that. How do you address that? And specifically, how can the city address its responsibility in terms of school funding?
It's not all funding, but it is funding. When you take a kid and put him in the school system, many times he may have not seen a doctor. So you have no idea whether he has any emotional problems, whether he has any eyesight problems, whether he has any physical other problems. So they come into a system without you knowing what they have. Secondly, you have a teacher who doesn't have all of the resources. So you have a teacher who's there, there's no nursing, there is no social service program, and the entrepreneurial principle, which is what I think should be a principle, goes out and looks for what services are available in and out of that community. So there should be a solution for that school which allows you to use the social, physical, playground services, PAL programs, things that will enrich the children and so that they can know.
Sure, but the question is about funding.
That's right. What I'm saying is that's part of what exists already today in communities. I gotta tell you, the article that I saw in the Inquirer about Woodland, where the teacher didn't have even a piece of paper. What I felt about that is, well, there's a program called APM, there's a program called Congresso, there's a program called Aspira. An entrepreneurial principal should go out there and figure out how to do the services that are necessary with existing programs. There are programs called Women Against Rape. There are programs that can teach you in terms of some of the issues that relate to social and economic issues. There are programs.
Okay, so connecting principals with various social service organizations that exist in the community.
Because they don't exist right now.
But again, there's a local funding responsibility too.
Now, the funding issue, I'm going to get to, which is really where you want to go. 16% of our city budget is real estate. Most major cities have 34% of their budgets are real estate. New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Boston, 34%. So what you have is you have a disconnect. Now, who pays for the school system? It's the real estate tax. So you have a disconnect right there in the process of the disincentive that we have, not only for business, but for the funding of the schools, one area. Changing and reforming that tax process will assist us in getting more funding to schools. The second thing is more of the residents pay the taxes than the commercial community. You have that issue related to the uniform tax issue. We have to be able to get the commercial payers here to pay more of the tax.
But in practical, tangible terms, how do you address that? How do you change that?
You change that by tax reform. You have to have tax reform which will entice people to stay here, the millennials to stay here. And if you have good schools, the millennial will stay here, because if they go on the other side of the city line, they have a school, they pay more taxes in real estate, $43,000 taxes, but they get a deduction, so why pay twice?
So what does that tax reform look like?
The tax reform looks like making the 34% look like a 34% on the real estate tax, reducing the wage taxes and the taxes that are essentially aggressive on the business community relating to the privilege taxes and the use tax. I mean, just make it a uniform one on that area, bring back the real estate taxes where they should be, and then get a funding process through the government. That means the governor. We have to then, the governor has a promise.
Is there any piece of that that requires either the city increasing the overall tax burden or cutting the city's budget to fund more money for the schools? Or is this something you think we can do without either raising taxes or cutting city services?
So I think there will be a little increase in taxes, but if we do it right, which means that we keep the good taxpayers that are paying their $1 million for their condos in Center City, that increases the real estate tax opportunity. So if we can keep those millennials here, and if we can keep the business people in the city instead of just the empty nesters, we will have an opportunity to increase our tax base on the real estate side and on the tax side. And so, yes, if you do both, which is which I call the wraparound services. The wraparound services providing all the needs that a kid has. That's what many of the charter schools do. That's why it's successful, because they provide a wraparound service for these kids to understand that, and also they cherry pick. So to some extent, on the public school side, there's no cherry picking, and as a result, if they don't work out in the charter school, they'll return back to the public school system, and so the school system continues to have that difficulty. But you've got to have a combination of the wraparound system, the increase in services, and you also have to hold principals and teachers accountable. You have to work an issue in which the principal is more entrepreneurial, has more liberty, and there's also a parent involvement. Now, parent involvement, how do you do that?
Let's hold up a second. If we've got charter schools that are successfully providing wraparound services, and some of them are, and some of them are high performers, how is that not an argument for more charter schools like that?
Because you're killing the public schools, because they can always dismiss the troubled kids. And if you dismiss the troubled kids like me, that would have been an example of me. They would have dismissed me because I didn't wake up till I was about 15 years old, and the school system hadn't been there for me. I would have been in trouble. My 3 kids went to the public school system. They're doing very well. They graduated, two went to international affairs, one went to engineering science, bid letter 86. You know, so I had all over the system, from Mount Airy to Albany to Center City. My grandkids are in the public school system today. Public school system is important because it's the only means for people to get out of poverty. It's the only thing people can't take away from you. Many of our public school kids are leaving school without even learning the basics of reading and writing. That's a crime. I mean, you spend all of that time and you don't teach them how to read and write, the minimum. And so I believe that we have to begin to do that. Now, everybody is not going to go to college. We should know that. And there's some jobs around that if you do the appropriate training, if you have what I had, the ability to do some vocational training, I decided to do vocational training because I wanted a job, never knowing that I could get into college, never knowing that I would be a lawyer. But that was my projection. If you give someone...
Are those mayoral level decisions in your mind, or is that the sort of thing that is up to a superintendent to decide? And I'm thinking of that because Superintendent Height released his third action plan for the district today. How confident do you feel with the leadership of the school district? And would you like Superintendent Height to say, if you're elected, you'll have 2 of 5 seats on the SRC? Is the district going in the right direction with Superintendent Height at the helm?
Well, I've spoken to the governor, and the governor and I have agreed if I'm elected, we're going to get rid of the SRC. The SRC is part of the problem because they absolutely have no knowledge of education, get involved in the integration of their political and business relationship instead of what's best for the kids. First, we have to know what's best for the kids. We have to know the financial issues, and we have to make sure, we keep the good charters, but let's get rid of the bad charters. Let's look at what the good charters do, and let's implement that in the rest of the schools. That was the real intent of charters. We've got to begin educating all children, and just not some children, and not just the best children. And that's what's happening today. That's why you're going to propagate poverty, just like they almost propagate poverty for me.
Okay, so if you're elected and you go for a successful adoption of the SRC, you'd have a significant say in the choice of the school superintendent. Is Superintendent Height your guy?
Well, I would think that the first thing you do is you get an appointment of parents who really care, who understand. You have to decentralize the school system because already it's a big bureaucracy. You have to find out why they continue to get deficit. When Connie Clayton was superintendent, I don't remember the deficit issue all the time. And she didn't get as much money as we've gotten from the state. You have to basically stabilize the funding issue, stabilize the wraparound system, stabilize the relationship between the union, the president of city council, the governor, the mayor, and the stakeholders. We have to sit down and say, look, here's what works. We know what works. We know what education requires. There's nothing new under the sun. Let's do this. Let's see how much it costs. We have more of a problem in Philadelphia than any other city in the state. Let's make a commitment to bring about. You know why? Because if we don't do this now, you're going to pay later $35,000 a kid in jail.
There's 2 episodes in your career that I'd like to talk about here. One is administrative judge on the civil side in Philadelphia courts, where you led the whole courts. Excuse me, where you led some significant reforms, and then second at HUD, where there were equally momentous reforms. I'd like you to describe, sort of in brief terms. Let's do courts first. What was it you did at the courts that sort of changed the way the courts operated, and what did it get you?
It wasn't easy. I took over the court system, and obviously it was filled with patronage. Patronage isn't bad as long as it's used correctly. But if you looked at every courtroom, you had 4 or 5 people in each courtroom, and you may need 3 or 4. If you looked at the probation department, you had 4 layers of management, when you only need 1 layer, when you needed a probation officer to be out on the street. If you looked at our cleaning crew, we had 55 people in the cleaning crew when experts told you all you needed was 11 people. So it wasn't rocket science again, it's management. So you look at what's needed, what's necessary. So there were too many people bumping into each other. Now on the civil side, we had a 7-year backlog. So what I did was, which wasn't very popular, was I took all of the judges and put them all on the criminal side, because under the Constitution, you can't have anyone that's not a constitutional judge. So I ran the entire criminal program with the 90 judges that I had under me. I ran the civil program with volunteer lawyers because you could waive the presence of a judge, and the jury never would know that this person sitting on the court was not a judge. We had jury trials. We were able to decrease the backlog because there's a theory in the civil side. If you know the theories, you can make it happen. Where there's a willing judge and you push the parties, 90% of the cases settled. 90% of the cases settled. So we got rid of the backlog. On the criminal side, we made people who were so comfortable on the civil side do criminal work. And we were able to reduce the backlog there. And the only backlog that we couldn't reduce was the homicide backlog, because this city has a larger proportion of homicides than many other cities. There were about 500 a year that we had to deal with. That was, and then I used 14 judges, each one to do a reform. Reform the jury system, reform the motion system, and I told them what I wanted to do, but I told them I wanted this done in 6 months. In 6 months, we did it all. We got rid of, and then when we got rid of the feather bedders, everybody was willing to work. Everybody was in there pushing because they didn't want to be the next one going. So it was really.
So tell me about the thanks.
And let me tell you the last thing that was toughest was I then issued a ranking order of productivity of judges, which I had never done. They have pretty much of a lifetime job. So I issued a ranking. The competition between all of the judges in terms of their productivity enable us also to move the calendars a lot faster. And that's continued for 20 years, and we saved $100 million and another $100 million, because when I was city solicitor, the president judge was going to sue us to increase the budget, and I said, I'll be the witness. I can tell you when.
All right, we'll get to that one in a second. So, and you basically got canned for that.
And I basically got, thank you very much, Nelson. Too much controversy, but we're very happy, and everybody loves me after it was done. So it was, then I went to HUD.
Right, and let's talk about that. There's this thing called the Diaz opinion, which can be challenging to understand, but I want you to try to explain it in simple terms and how it's sort of how public housing, not just the village.
If you recall, and maybe all of you are too young to recall this, but all like a bunch of bricks. They had a brick house, and there were higher buildings. That's what public housing. That was the sort of generation of the German architects in terms of public housing. Well, we found
towers in the cities and the pile of bricks elsewhere.
All the cities around the country. There were 23 lawsuits that I had the opportunity to take the measure of using what was known as the Hope 6 program. Hope 6 program is a funding process which allows to take the federal money and use it for renovation of public housing. Because it was allowable of the litigation to settle, which usually doesn't happen. Usually Justice Department has that responsibility. I took that money and settled 23 lawsuits, and when I did, I even settled with the Philadelphia one. The most significant one that took me the longest and the hardest was the one in Dallas, Texas. There was a high-rise building, isolated, the cheapest land under a smell factory. Those children were getting contamination, illnesses, and other. There was a suit that was in the courts for 12 years. I resolved that lawsuit, had them build housing integrated into the community that didn't look like public housing, but also I allowed the public housing authorities, under my opinion, to be able to partner with local developers.
Right, so this is the key thing here, right? So it's making public housing less sort of a top-down process, and one in which the local housing authority partners with local developers, and local financing is used to help develop the projects.
If you remember the magic of a Newark man called leveraging, having done economic development in Philadelphia, that's what you do when you leverage. You get a loan for X amount of dollars, and you buy yourself a drugstore, and you take that drugstore and buy yourself another one. You keep leveraging it. Same, likewise, having the local developers using the federal dollars, they were able to leverage the federal dollars to get private capital to expand housing for affordable and middle-class people.
Right, it's that raises something good. So you're clearly a liberal, a progressive, and yet you're a liberal who's not afraid of either, cracking heads in a bureaucratic context, or embracing, market capitalism when it kind of furthers the ends you're hoping to further. So I mean, do you see those two as I guess they haven't been mutually exclusive in your career, and I guess I'm curious as to how that developed for you, how you're a liberal who looks for those kinds of solutions.
Remember, I was an accounting major, worked at Gimbel Brothers, who essentially knew something about taxes. I had done tax returns for people forever for free in the churches and so forth. So I had a knowledge of economic development. I come to Philadelphia, and I'm working with all of these grocers. I had 40 grocers that I represented. I did cooperatives, and so I was leveraging what I had there to essentially keep that corner working. When I then do housing development, I developed the first partnership with a guy by the name of Rosenthal, who came in from New York, and we developed the first affordable housing in maybe 30 years in North Philadelphia in the Latino community. So I thought that that's the way you do work. For me, it was not an experiment. It was, for me, my life. When I had lived in public housing, we had strong management. If you broke a window, you had to pay for it. If you stuffed the area, you had to pay for it. You had inspectors come in every 6 months into your apartment to make sure that you were maintaining the house and the apartment correctly. We went away from that.
Let's tilt this forward a little bit. So, using that sort of, are the problems that the city faces today that you would employ those sort of, bureaucratic busting, market embracing tactics on, and very practically, what would they be? What problems would you tackle using those methods, and how?
You're reading my mind, because I would love to tackle all those vacant units. Take all those vacant units that exist and either put them into a land bank or have the Public Housing Authority return the 7,000 units that have been lost in the city, or begin utilizing most of them for either green spaces or for opportunities for people to live in them, instead of continuing to have this blight around the city. Because if you have one blight building next to you, the next building is going to get blight, and people begin to reduce their interest in keeping that place clean.
I mean, are there other sections of the city apart from housing and vacant land development?
Well, even if it causes me to die, I'm gonna fix the school system. It is got to be done, because if we don't do that, I'm telling you, nothing else is gonna work in the city. Nothing else. Look at the businesses. We are next to Detroit in bringing small business development to Philadelphia. I mean, we're better than Detroit, I hope.
Yeah, this is good. I mean, this is, this place right here is a small business incubator. I mean, and again, please, specifically, would you do as mayor to try to keep small businesses that are growing here to stay here and to try new ones?
There are a couple of problems with that. One is obviously the regressive tax process. People can go across the line, they'll have to pay the 4.2, 4.3 taxes. Secondly, it's not a friendly business opportunity in terms of City Hall. All of the impediments that they have to go through, a lot of the corruption that exists. Thirdly, there is an importance of making sure that we do what PIDC does in the Navy Yard, where they essentially take you where the capital is, take you with the experts, and produce land-based and a community-based and an economic base. What we do at the Navy Yard should be done in other neighborhood development activities. The last and biggest problem is there's no venture capital. Venture capital is one of the lowest in the top 10 cities in the country. We are the lowest in providing venture capital for small businesses to expand.
So how do you attract that?
You take the 80 institutions you have in our city, you begin utilizing the expertise and the relations they have. You take those great business schools, and we begin attracting venture capitalists that will provide the technology, the knowledge, and the opportunity for them to get the assistance to grow.
In terms, let's talk a little bit about City Hall. You talked about the need for significant change in the way sort of the city does business. How fundamental does it need to get? I mean, do we need a charter convention? Do we need to rewrite the sort of the rules that govern the city? Do we need term limits in city council? Do we need that sort of thing, or is this more a matter of relationships and management than the rule book?
Not being a traditional in politics, being a judge is not really politics. I believe that you need a strong executive to be able to make things happen and push things to occur. I didn't need anything but the willpower to make the courts happen. I didn't need anything but the willpower to reform public housing in the entire country. I had no idea that I was doing the entire country. I was just thinking, this is the way you're supposed to do it. If you understand bureaucrats, they are so tied into a box of authorization and appropriation. I'm not tied into any box. If you can do it and you can get away with making sure that we can make things easier and better and more feasible for development, you have to do it. And that's a problem, is people get caught up in this.
So it's a management issue.
That's no question about it. If you've got a strong executive and a strong proven person, you're the CEO, you hire the best people you can find. One of the things that made Rendell very successful was he had David O. Cohen. Without David O. Cohen, I'm not sure that Rendell would have been a success.
So who's your David O. Cohen?
I gotta wait till I get elected to tell you.
Let's talk about your political relationships a little bit. I mean, you've been obviously in the world of government for a long time. You've been around a long time. You know all the players, but you're right. You've not been a political player per se. I mean, is that a strength or a weakness? And then sort of the second part of that is sort of how strong or what's the nature of your relationship with the big powers out there? I mean, Brady, Doc, the top.
Well, obviously, Doc is with somebody else. I guess my relationship with Doc is not that great.
Thank you for your candor.
But I think that as soon as I get elected, he's going to try to make it like it's that great. As you know, everybody's with you when you win. I have had the opportunity, and I'm very grateful because I always think I could have been on the other side of the fence. But I have had the opportunity to work for the Clinton administration, the Carter administration, and the Obama administration. I've had the opportunity to work with governors and mayors in the city. And I've had the opportunity to work with some of the best national leaders, whether it's Cisneros, whether it's Peña, whether it's the Secretary of Labor. I've had those opportunities. And so I believe that based on my national experience, I have access to people that other people won't have, particularly on the international business scene. I don't have to take a trip to Spain. I can call somebody in Spain and say, look, is there an opportunity that you would like to develop here? I don't have to take a trip to Italy. I can call somebody in Italy and say that. Or I can call somebody in Washington who has a relationship with somebody in Italy. So I've had that long-term. The ambassador, for example, the ambassador to the United States to Italy is a guy that I serve with in the Commission for White House Fellows. So I've got relationships nationally. I serve with Sarbanes on a bunch of committees. So on a national basis, I've had that fortune to serve. I was on the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee during the Clinton period. So I knew the McAuliffes of the world. So I've had that opportunity to have those relationships. I think they all think I'm a nice guy. But now, what's important is I want you to produce something for my city. I've had clients. Would you believe that most of my clients happen to be in New York, and I practice in Philadelphia? Major banks, major construction companies. Why? Because it is cheaper for them to hire me from here than it is from New York. The other thing is, if we have that,
Can we bring some of those guys down here?
that's exactly right. And I'm telling you what we have to do. You know, people talk about this fast train that we have to develop. If we make it affordable, you know, people coming in from Long Island, what it takes them to get into the city of New York or Connecticut, over an hour. If we had SEPTA have an express train from Trenton to Philadelphia, we get here in an hour and 35 minutes. That's faster than they get from any other point in New York to New York City to work. So this doesn't cost any money. It's just a regulatory change. So if you think out of the box, nothing new, I'm telling you. If you think out of the box, you can make things more affordable, more capable, and we can bring back this city to its glory.
All right, let's talk about it, and let's try to do this quickly, because it's not like these are big, complicated issues, but I want to get you on the record on a few of these. Department of Licenses and Inspections is a mess. What would you do to fix
The Department of Bicycle and Inspection. Are you talking about the Department of License and Inspection?
it? Did I say bicycle?
It's a bicycle.
Sorry about that, licenses.
You're thinking about the bicycle path, I was thinking.
That's a question.
Oh, I was wondering where that was a new department that I had to worry about. The Department of License Inspection obviously has had very poor management, and it's been known as this corrupt agent. And that's why you would have to really.
You still, is that part of the problem now, you think, still there, corruption?
It's always going to be the problem, because, you know, they go where they want to go, and they cite whoever they want to cite, instead of citing everybody, or this needs to be done.
That's a pretty serious allegation. So you think there's still corruption alive and well in L&I?
Yeah, of course, of course. I used to represent them, so I know the problems that exist there. I represented them, I represented the cops, I represented the firemen, I represented all the city employees for 3 years. So I have an insight on many of the legal problems that I had to represent. There is a need for us to say, that property is in bad shape, let's condemn the property. And if they're not going to fix it, let's take it over and give this. This is the only city that waits 1, 2, 3 years before they do anything with a vacant property. If the property is vacant and you're not going to do anything with it, let's take it away from them and let's put it in a bank and let's give it to somebody who's going to do something resourceful with it. We can now build for less density because the city has almost 1 million people less than we had in the prior generations. And so we can build with less density. And that's the importance of having a community relationship, a building where people feel comfortable, where they have bike trails, where they have parks, where they have good schools.
Pensions. It's even a bigger mess than L&I. How are you going to fix that, and how are you going to pay for it? Because that's really what the problem requires.
That's a softball question.
How's that?
I did that at Exelon. The same ratio between what the problem you have here and the problem that we had at Exelon existed. I forced the CEO to hire a CIO who was extremely competent, came from Chrysler Company, and from a 65, and you're talking about between 11 and 15 billion dollars, and now it's 85% funded. Not only did I do that, but I was able to get them to do $2 billion of minority asset managers. Could you guess who the top asset manager was in the entire portfolio? An African-American asset manager from Baltimore.
But is asset management really the issue for the Philadelphia pension system? It's outperformed its target goals the last few years. It seems like there's a capital problem too there, you know?
I was able to increase from 65 to 85 without putting another dime into it. It's not only a capital problem, but it's also a management problem. You can make better investments. You can hold them more accountable. With the market the way it's going today, many of the investors who lost at 20 and 30% are above the 20 and 30% today. So you have
So you don't think the pension problem requires additional capital, just better management?
it may require additional capital, but I'm telling you that doesn't require as much additional capital as people assume that it's going to be, because if you manage it correctly, if you've got the great asset managers, if you've got the right investors, and if you have a CIO who's competent to do that, this CIO, by the way, that I'm telling you, and you can check the numbers out, and you can check Exelon out, and you can check the fact that I was the one that made that happen. After 2 years of arguing with them, I can do the same thing for the city of Philadelphia. That's a problem. People are not willing to look. And let me tell you, it wasn't because I was smarter than anybody else. It's because I had served on a board known as Lake Mason. And having served then on a board that was mismanaging their pension funds, which essentially would come out of the bottom line, it was for me something that I felt was a fiduciary responsibility to correct. And we corrected it. And I think I could do the same for Philadelphia.
How much time we got here? Time for audience? Okay. All right, we're going to open this up to audience questions, and I think we've got an intimate enough crowd that we'll just raise hands and speak up, please.
They should give them all awards for coming out of this, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Feel free to take some pretzels home.
In terms of you're wanting to eliminate the SRC, are you saying you want to go back to a appointed school board like we had before? That's one question. The second question is, if you get rid of the SRC, how are you going to get money from the state, since that's what the SRC is?
Good questions.
Because you have to have a dedicated funding process for the school system in Philadelphia. I will take a coalition of mayors throughout the state who have the same kind of vision and continue to report on that lawsuit that was filed. What we have in Philadelphia is a separate but unequal system. And in my opinion, it is the most important civil right issue in this country. And I would take that suit into federal court as to the violation of this governor or whatever governor's policy with regard to funding children in the Philadelphia system.
Just follow up on that real quick. I mean, isn't calling for the disbandment of the SRC before funding is in place kind of the cart before the horse? And Bill Green, before he was sort of sacked as chairman, was saying that he would, lead the move to disband the SRC, once there was, substantial funding in place from the state.
Well, obviously he didn't listen to the governor. The governor said, let's put a moratorium on charters until we decide the issue of funding, and he still decided to give a number of charters away, which essentially continues to take money out of the major public school system. That's not good management.
The cart before the horse question. I mean, if does not disbanding the SRC kind of make the city lose leverage in its negotiations with
the SRC?
Harrisburg over school
I'm
funding?
telling you, the SRC is the problem. We have to return it back to its parents. We have to have local control, and you have to have the mayor responsible for the management of that school. You pick the right people, you make sure you have the relationship with the governor, and you make sure you have the relationship with the president of city council, and I don't care who takes credit. All I want to do is make sure that it works for every kid, because every child deserves a quality education.
Okay, no
And
question.
so, the SRC is a real problem.
Yeah, I'd like to throw you a hanging curveball. I know what my mama did in naming me and why she named me what she did. Do you know why your mama named you Nelson?
Yeah, that's a good question,
Because it's been a lot to me when I figured it out.
do you know what Nelson means, by the way?
I do, and I'd like to open up, and I know some Nelsons who were
Well, we keep fighting whether it's because of Lord Nelson in the movie or was Nelson Rockefeller. So as a result, I use the name Nelson ain't Rockefeller.
Okay.
Back there.
Good evening. I'm here representing our veteran community here in the city. Of course, I haven't heard anything being mentioned what would be, what could be done for the veterans. I would like to know, when you are elected, will you have any veterans representatives on your staff? That's number one. Secondly, we have a vast majority of veterans, we have the largest veterans community of the tri-state area. And as I suppose many of you are aware, that we have many homeless veterans. We have a couple of homes spread throughout the city. Hardly any veterans really know about them. And the ones that, the homes that are here, they are already overpassed. We have a waiting list.
Okay, I get the idea. So Judge, what would you do to help the city's veterans, and more specifically, homeless veterans who don't have adequate facilities available to them?
I would do what my wife did for the women veterans of this country. She created a kit which provides homeless service, job services, educational services, housing vouchers, all within a kit. Bring them in, all the veterans who are homeless, and figure out whether they have substance abuse issues. We have to provide the services. You guys have given, and gals have given so much for our freedoms that we owe it to you. And she was very successful in the fact that there were 30% of women abused in this country in the military. And she was able to create that sense of service for those. In fact, it was so successful that the president took it over. I think her example is something that I would love to use on also the veterans of this city.
Other questions?
So quick question about, so school district's request this year for additional funding is $103 million. And Mayor Nutter today said that he's going to address that by raising the property tax rate. Do you agree with what he's proposed? And if not, what would you propose specifically to reach that $103 million?
I think the property tax is disproportionately heavy on residents. What the governor has proposed is a homestead exemption, which I think is really an important aspect of keeping people who are in the neighborhood. First thing.
But
The second,
assuming that doesn't happen, maybe he can't get it through the legislature, but then what is the solution?
Well, I think a lot of the solutions that you and the other candidates are talking about with school funding are sort of structural, long-term. It's shifting the balance. It's all long-term. Increasing the tax base, that's not something that happens like the day you're sworn in.
you're right about that. It doesn't happen when you come in. But let me tell you, let me continue to respond to your question. You can't continue to tax burden on the residents of the city. You have to begin taxing the 1%ers who are getting the benefits of all of what we do. And that's what's not happening. When I talked about that we only have 16% of the budget real estate taxes, that 60% is heaviest on you because of the abatements programs and all of the other incentives, like Comcast getting $52 million.
But Judge, how do you tax the 1%ers when we have this thing called the uniformity clause in the Constitution that prohibits, different taxation rates?
You're absolutely right on that. And that's why you have to change the 34% concept and begin developing programs like the Homesteader program, which allows you to reduce the tax burden on residents and increase the tax burdens on the commercial property. And that's not happening. Why should they be paying the same taxes you're paying? When they get more of the benefit and they take home more of the benefit and they don't even live in the city.
All right, other questions?
But you asked good questions.
We have a homestead exemption.
Not the one the governor's proposing.
What's the difference?
It's bigger. Governor's proposing 60,000.
And that would could you legally identify that as commercial property? I assume.
I think there's some debate over that. It seems some of the folks who are pushing the shift to property tax think that, no, you're not going to be able to do that, that it would require a constitutional amendment, which would take years.
Like you said, we have a homestead exception now. Why not increase the homestead exception even higher. And it's working right now as a homestead exemption. So why not continue to do it? Now, that's an argument, that's a legal argument. What I tell you is, unless somebody's gonna file a lawsuit, you gotta take your chances.
You want to cut back on abatements?
Yes, I do. I think that we give too many abatements in the business community and not enough taxing responsibility in terms of the weight that we need for the school system to be paid. Because real estate taxes are the basis, unfortunately, of how schools are funded.
Let's do 2 more questions here.
Judge, it's my understanding from today's paper or yesterday's news that the governor wants to tax attorneys on their income. Now, this has been an issue for, as you well know, for many, many years in the city. And I'd like to get your thoughts on the governor's proposal, which I happen to believe is unconstitutional, but I put that aside. I'd like to know what you think just of using that as a basis for increasing taxes.
I thought I was being taxed as an attorney already.
Yeah, well, I being a lawyer, you mean.
Yeah, I thought I was being taxed as an attorney already, so, I'm paying my 1%er.
That's a legal service.
Yes, exactly.
The sales tax.
Oh, you're talking about a sales tax to attorneys?
Taxes on their earnings.
Oh, you're talking about a sales, I guess you're talking about.
I think it's on the sales tax, on the client side.
I don't know, so I've got to study that issue more, because I had no idea that there was a plan on that process, but I'm paying my taxes as an attorney, and my income taxes are available to the public.
No, it wasn't a question about that. It's a question of tax and services for the things.
Everybody seems to talk about charter schools versus public schools, and how to generate more revenue, whether it's state and or not. You have a lot of mismanagement and bloated bureaucracy at 440. What are you going to do to clean that up specifically?
I'm sorry, I can't.
You have a lot of bloated bureaucracy that exists down at 440 still with all these cuts. What are you going to do to eliminate
440, you mean the building, the school district?
Yeah, the big.
Yeah, well, that's endemic right now to most educational institutions. If you want to go to Drexel University now, you pay $55,000 in tuition. My son went only about 20 years ago, it was $11,000 in tuition. So this continued bureaucracy of this high-level corporate and sort of middle management has really been an issue that we have sort of gotten away with. I just told you what I did at the probation department. We had 4 layers of management. Got rid of the 4 layers, kept 1 layer of management, and those 3 layers that we got rid of, we got more probation officers on the street, and we still saved 50 of all of the expenditures in that area. So it can be done. Management sometimes believes that they can sit back and continue to delegate and delegate and delegate. You should be a part of the action.
All right, we'll take this last one back here, and then we're done.
Just a quick follow-up there. How do you do that in the school district then, as mayor? How do you work with Clayton to say, get 440 out of that? I mean, you talk about entrepreneurial, giving entrepreneurial, allowance to principals, which I think is awesome. But how do you do that with the school district? How do you work with Clayton to get rid of the bureaucratic stuff at 440 Broad and actually get stuff done?
I want to give you the example of what I think is the best school in this region. It happens to be in Camden, New Jersey. I happen to represent them. It's called LEAP. 100% of the kids go on to college. She has a pre-K program. It goes from 3 to high school. There's a continuum of education, a continuum of social services. There is a contractual relationship, and it's loosely, it's not a legal contract, but somewhat of a binding relationship between the parent and the school. The kids can't go to class until they eat breakfast there, they eat lunch there, and there's an after-school program. Go see LEAP, and you see that's the education that I think every child in this city deserves. So I'm not talking about something out of the blue. I'm talking about something that exists today and should happen in every school in Philadelphia.
I agree, but I mean, how?
I don't care about
All
the
right.
legislation.
We could do this all night. Schools. Goodness. No, we're done. You had a question. Mr. Nelson. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you coming out.
Thank you so much.
That's good.